I've been coming to the Bayou Classic literally since I was a child. I was elected when I was 23. I think I've been here almost every year. I might have come to the Bayou Classic even before I was elected with my father. I've seen this amazing event. Years ago, it was much larger, then it got smaller. This year is one of the largest, and I know it's because this game is so important between two champions on the field. But I also want you all to know these schools are champions off the field as well. And what Southern and Grambling have done to lift our state and move it forward and to lift the South and lift this nation and the world cannot be overstated. The graduates of these two schools are leading some of the great corporations in the world. They're making huge, huge differences. And I don't think we hear enough of that. Of course, the Black Caucus knows that, but I want you to hear it from me, and I wish I heard it from the other senator that represents the state, but I never hear a word from him. I never hear a word from the other members of our delegation except for Cedric Richmond, and I'm sure Cedric is on his way and will be here to be supportive. I never hear that from anyone, and I most certainly never hear it from Bobby Jindal. When 3 African-American universities were on the brink of extinction, listen to me, extinction, Dillard, Xavier, which was close to closing, Dillard, which was on the verge of extinction, and Suno, which was virtually destroyed after the storm, I didn't have one call, not one from the governor, not one from the other senator that I serve with, not one from one member of the delegation except for the representative from this region to say, oh my gosh, how could we lose 3 universities? It was just business as usual and move on. Well, there's nothing about moving on when you've got 3 universities at risk. So I led the fight with this Black Caucus. And we went to Washington, and we went to this president and to the last president that we had, President Bush, who was the president, you all remember him, in Katrina, that didn't want to give us any money for anything. And we went to that president and we said, you are going to find $300 million, and you are going to find it now. And you know what? He found it. We found it together. And those universities are standing today. And we have gone back many times for Grambling and for Southern. That's federal money coming in, and the Black Caucus is doing what it can out of this measly budget that Bobby Jindal provides. Measly, out of the crumbs, not out of the largesse, out of the crumbs that he provides for health care in this state and education. They fight hard for their fair share portion. But I'm here to tell this audience, we deserve more than crumbs. We deserve the cake, the icing, and everything in it. And we have got to stand up and start fighting and demanding what is right. I'm going to close with this. In this campaign, there are 100 issues, but I want to tell you about 3 real quickly. One, people keep asking me, why can't you get Bill Cassidy's record out? Why can't you get your opponent's record out? So, well, one reason is the man won't show up. I mean, the man will not show up. He showed up to 1 debate in 18 months. 1. Monday night is the only debate he's doing with me after that race. 1, because he's afraid of you, he's afraid of seniors, he's afraid of veterans, and he's got no record to stand on because all he can talk about is President Barack Obama. And he doesn't speak about the president in a very respectful way, does he? So you can disagree with the president. I've disagreed with 3 of them. I've served with 3 of them. I served with Bush, I served with President Clinton, I served with President Obama. But you don't have to disrespect the office or the man. You do not have to disrespect the office or the man. So he can take his disrespectful self and try to run away. But I am going to ask him about his record. But I want to tell you something we found out a couple of months ago that's just breaking on the news, and you all should listen to it and talk to your friends that might not be tuned in to this race. And they're not people in this room, but there are communities that are not tuned in to this race. And for these friends that you may have, I want you to know this. Bill Cassidy, who's a doctor, worked at LSU for the 6 years that he also worked in Congress. And we found out that he has collected $50,000 a year in addition to his salary, $20,000 in cash and $25,000 in compensation, which includes the payment of medical malpractice. Anybody that's a doctor in here, and I'm sure I have doctors in the house, know how expensive medical malpractice can be. So for his line of work, he's a gastroenterologist, I never can say that word, but he's a stomach doctor. His $25,000, and they paid his fees, so lawyers and doctors know you got to pay plenty fees. So $50,000 a year he collected in addition to his congressional salary, and does not have a record to prove that he did the work. And on television this week, this is what he said, quote, "I don't have to do anything. I get paid whether I do it or not." Quote, "I don't have to do it. I get paid whether I do it or not." I said, now that would be news to 2 million people who don't punch a clock, but they work on salary. Can you imagine going to work and telling your boss, I can do what I want and I just expect my paycheck? But that's the guy we're running against. So I know you're motivated, but I hope you will be motivated to talk to your friends about a guy who won't show up at a debate, who won't even talk about his own record, talking about everybody else's record, including the president, but his own. He refuses to support health care, but won't give any alternative to providing health care for people who are sick. And this is the two that really hurt my heart, and it should hurt yours, and I'll close with this. He will not support a bill to increase Pell Grants. Now listen to me about Pell Grants. Pell Grants are the only thing the federal government does or funds that helps lift really poor families that have no access to higher education, lift them up and out. Poor families, lower income families, and I know that there are many wealthy families in this room, so I am not speaking directly to you. I am speaking to the people that are not here, that never went to college, that have no pathway to college, that have no pathway, some of them to finish high school, that have no pathway to community colleges, and they're millions. Pell Grants are the only thing that lift them up. When Pell Grants were introduced many years ago, it was named after Claiborne Pell, the senator from Rhode Island. They were worth 100% of the average cost of college. So if a poor child in America wanted to go to college, they could get a Pell Grant, get themselves to college, lift themselves, lift their families, lift their communities. It's not just a personal luxury to go to college, it's a public good. It's the way our country builds itself, by building the middle class. You know what those Pell Grants are worth today? 35% of the average cost. So when a poor child gets only a portion of what they're owed, and then they have to go borrow money to make up the difference, we have lots of kids representing in these schools, not everybody, on Pell Grants and student loans. Bill Cassidy refuses to increase student loans. I've got a bill to double it from $4,000 to $9,000. He refused and said he will not sign on to it because the country can't afford it. The country can't afford not to invest in some of the smartest kids in this country. Just because they're poor doesn't mean they're not smart. And number two, he had the nerve on the only debate that he showed up to, and I see Natalie Rabada, my good friend, she was at this debate, and she's been a fabulous supporter, one of the great elected officials that's been supporting me, and Marlon Gusman in the back. He had the nerve to show up and say, not only will he not support the increase in Pell Grants, because of course millionaires need a tax break, people that make over $1 million need a tax break, but also he won't support the lowering of the rates on student loans. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you're paying more than 5 or 6% on your house note, you better go see your banker. Go see Patrick Bell. If you're paying more than 2 or 3% on your car note, you need to go see someone. Do you know the interest rate on student loans is anywhere from 8.5% to 11%? making our students and people pay high interest rates so that he can give tax breaks to millionaires. That's what this race is really about. It's not about President Obama's record. It's not about Harry Reid's record. It's not about Mitch McConnell's record. It's about the guy we are running against, Dr. Cassidy, double dipping $50,000 a year at the same time. And all this is paid through Medicaid, which is ironic. Ironic. Medicaid and Medicare pay these LSU doctors. It's ironic. Standing in the way of 252,000 people getting health insurance, and then refuse to double or to increase Pell Grants and stand in the way of students reducing their interest loans. You want to talk about barriers to education? I'll give you his name. It's spelled Cassidy. Barrier to education. Let's say no and get rid of him. God bless you.
First of all, let me thank the Louisiana Legislative Black Caucus and the foundation and the board members of the foundation for everything that they do. It's a tough fight. It's a fight that many people don't get to see the down and dirty. But up here, we have people that fight every day. They fight behind the doors. And there's a saying in Congress is that if you're not in the room, you're on the menu. And the fact that these representatives and these senators are in the room, I feel a lot more comfortable about our future. I'm trying to glance through the audience and see if Congresswoman Corrine Brown is here. Corrine, if you're here, stand up. I guess she's not here yet, but she's coming today, and I just want to say a word about her, because after the storm, when the VA came together and tried to decide to move the hospital, there were two people who fought. One person in the Senate named Mary Landrieu, and one woman in the House named Corrine Brown, who was just elected ranking member on Veterans Affairs. And they made sure that not only did our hospital come back, but it came back bigger and better to honor the veterans and the things that they do. So let me publicly thank Senator Landrieu and Corrine Brown for that. I won't speak long, and I don't even remember what I wanted to say. But before I left home, and I was on the sofa, and I just went to a funeral for one of our Zulu kings, really phenomenal guy. And I went home, and then I was with the baby, and TV commercial came on from Cassidy, and a couple of them. But I just wanted, I mean, my blood started to boil, and there was nothing I could do about it. And I got to the point where I said, you know what? I'm finally just going to call this for exactly what it is. And I think it's important that the people in the room acknowledge exactly what it is so that we get motivated by it and we push people to go out and vote and do something, because this is the most vile, disrespectful, ugly, nasty, racist campaign I've ever seen in my life. So, while I was getting really, really furious and trying to temper what I wanted to say, I said, well, young black man can't get up and say it's a racist campaign because people are going to say I'm an angry black man. Well, actually, I'm a passionate black man, and I'm a father with a kid with aspirations of going to college. At least I have aspirations for him. He's 7 months old, so who knows what he has. And I have aspirations for him going to college at a reasonable rate. And this election's about that. It's not about race. It's not about how often you vote with the president. And hey, look, 6 years ago, the Dow was at 7,000, now it's at 17,000. Unemployment was at over 10%, now it's in the 5% range. The deficit was $1.5 trillion, now it's $500 billion. Gas was sky high now, and they blamed them for high gas prices. Now that gas is low, they're not giving them the credit for low gas prices. So if we just have to talk about a record, then we can defend any record that we have. We have done amazing things. Flood insurance was a problem. The senator and I fixed it. And when you talk about who's in the room, Cassidy wasn't even in the room. When we're talking about leadership and we're talking about what's important, he wasn't there. But still, as I started to get a little bit more emotional about the fact that this campaign is all boiled down to President Obama, which, you know what? I almost could live with that. But then if you just look at the campaign, and I can't really use the word I want to use, the campaign is really don't vote for Mary because she's an African-American lover. Because her track record for fighting for Pell Grants, for putting line items in appropriations bills so that Southern and Grambling and all our HBCUs can get more money. Because she's in the room, and with a stroke of a pen, we get millions more every time she does that. So this campaign, when you look at the TV and it's how do you spell Landrieu? Well, I had enough time learning it on my own, but how do you spell Landrieu? She votes with the president 97% of the time. Who knows what it's saying, but let me just give everybody in here a warning. And it may not be to all the African Americans in the room, but Dr. King said, in the end, it's not the words of our enemies that we will remember. It's the silence of our friends. So when I think about our non-African American clergy, who I think have a responsibility to stand up and call this race for what it is, and call the nastiness for what it is, the question becomes, where are you? We don't just need to hear you on conservative social bedroom issues. But there's a nastiness going on in the state. Our children are seeing it play out on TV every day, and we want to know where they learn bullying from. But people are silent on it. So where's our clergy? Where are our elected officials? We need people to stand up that are not necessarily African American, who will stand up and say, you know what this is? This is race baiting at its worst. Because we're not talking about records and issues anymore, because I would put our senator's record up against anyone. I'd put my record up against Cassidy, and he's been there longer than me. So this race is not about leadership, it's not about effectiveness, because the senator that we have over the last 18 years has done a remarkable job. She's made some very, very hard votes. I can remember a vote which, sometimes you say with a very hard vote, you say, I'll be the vote that puts it over the top. But if it's not going to pass, then I'm not going to be there, because I won't bleed for it if it's not going to pass. And there was a civil rights vote coming up. And I said, well, Mary, if you have to be the last vote, we need you. But if it's not going to pass, don't get beat up for voting that way. And she said, so the vote went down and didn't have enough votes. And I called her, I said, well, didn't have enough votes. I understand if you voted no. She said, I didn't vote no. I followed my heart and I did the right thing. So for that type of leadership, we need to make sure that we leave this room and that we push people to get involved, to be active, to go out and vote, because this race is more about us than it is about Senator Landrieu. And we should show people that when it's about us, we show up and we show out. Thank you and God bless you.